Okay, I want to welcome you all to the Snippy panel discussion. Tonight we're going to open up things and why are we here, what's going on, and we're going to talk a little bit about Snippy. So I want to welcome everybody to the land, the King Family Orbit, and it's a great thing to have this event. It's the second year getting going. Why are we here? So just a brief overview of the incident of Snippy. We're looking at September 7th, 1967 as the date and time that Snippy happened. And it's the King Family Ranch, which is 7 miles to the east of this location. We're not on the location, but we're very close. And one of the family mares, horse lady, was found dead near the ranch property after missing for 2 days. The body and surrounding area were found with a set of circumstances that were very strange. They were confusing, they were scary. Burl, the horse's owner, misidentified Lady, the horse, with the press and named it the horse Snippy, which was Lady's mother. Because he liked Snippy better, is what he said. So that's what happened. So the press ran with Snippy. And today we talk about Snippy the horse, who is really Lady the mare. Alamosa police, local law enforcement, Fish and Wildlife, Adams State, and CSU were left with no clear answers of what happened to the horse, to the mare, what happened to Snippy. The family was equally perplexed. Nearly 60 years later, we have no clear answers. So I want to just introduce our panel members real quick. Now that you have a brief overview, I want to introduce Dave King here to my left. His father was Bob King, who saw the horse's body days after the incident. And as a boy, Dave grew up with a mutilated horse mystery literally hanging over his head. Dave is the inspiration for this event, and he'll easily talk about Snippy's legacy and long-term impacts to the family. I was introduced to Snippy as a small boy in the book Unsolved Mysteries. Snippy fascinated me. Lady's death, although tragic, has provided an opening to create an event to explore Snippy and other mysteries that surround our universe. And Katie Page, here to my right, has spent countless hours studying the impacts of the paranormal, the odd, the cryptid, and she's spent a lot of time understanding our universe. And so as we get into the Snippy incident, I just want to really just give a quick overview of what happened. And when Snippy's body was discovered, it was a mutilated body. There was a lot of unusual characteristics about the horse's body. There was precise cuts that were cauterized around the girdle, the shoulder girdle of the horse's neck, and all of the flesh was removed from the neck up, leaving a precise cut with bleached bones around the head. It was a very big mystery, and no animal tracks were around Snippy. There was no blood around the body. There was no blood in the body. There was strange markings around the ground, and there was no bugs or animals present. When an animal dies, coyotes to birds to ants, they'll feast on a carcass. This was not the case with Snippy. And there was radioactivity discovered around the body with a Geiger counter. Nellie's hand burned my great aunt as she picked up the horse's hair tuft. The horse was missing for 2 nights. These are all just facts that came through in the study. There's a lot of historical and cultural impacts to the area. It was the second most followed story in the United States in 1967, next to Vietnam. Snippy's body was a mystery that no one really knew what to do with. And it was the start of a flap of time here in the San Luis Valley where thousands of animal mutilations were reported. The ownership of the horse's bones was caught up in a myriad of legal issues over the 50-some years, and the horse is now preserved at the UFO Watchtower in Hooper, Colorado, by Judy Messoline, who is supposed to be on this panel along with Joe Spencer. And we missed those two. I just want to open it up to Dave to start, and I want to ask you, Dave, how did Snippy impact you as a boy? I'm going to pass you the microphone.
There were several things that happened before Snippy happened to me, and here in the San Luis Valley. I was born in Alamosa, grew up in Mosca. My father was principal there, and those that know my dad, he just passed, and we buried him in the Uraca Pioneer Cemetery up on the hill here. And he's, I would consider him to be the man of the family, most respected person. He was 12th of 12. He was a miracle child, born of his mother at 49, and so he was very well thought of in the San Luis Valley. In fact, Donnie Hart's here, one of my cousins, and his wife Shannon, and Dad was one of those people in the valley that was very well thought of. And my grandmother Agnes was a pioneer, and my grandfather Coley was a pioneer, and they had a ranch that we would go stay on a lot. And so I think that to properly paint my picture, I would go stay for a week at a time as a young kid, and sometimes I'd see Donnie, and sometimes I'd see the Grindle cousins, but more than anything else, I would catch Harry, Uncle Harry, who was a bachelor that lived in the house and ran the ranch. He would paint pictures of stories to me at night at ages 4 and 5. That up near Big Bear in the kind of canyon, Donnie and I were looking at it today. Just due north of Lake Como, he believed there was a vortex. And so as a 4 and 5 year old boy, I would hear about these stories of UFOs going into the mountain and not coming out. And so the whole concept was always there with me as a young child. And we would play games of who could stay in the back of the car, sleep in the back of the car. We had the old shelves on the old 2-seat cars, and there was a shelf where you'd look out the back window, and that was kind of our sky bridge where we would watch the sky night to see who could stay out all night. And this is 4 or 5 or 6 year olds, and I don't remember ever making it. And then when I did have to stay there, I finally got the stories. Why was my grandmother so sad? And she was an older woman, and the best way to explain it, at that time she'd either buried 6, 7, or 8 of her own children, and her husband had finally passed later on after that. And so she was always talking about death. And so I had this UFO thing hanging over me, and I had death hanging over me, and I'm a 4, 5, 6 year old. And then when I stayed there were 2 choices. I could get in the old Tundra roll-out bed next to Harry, where he got up early in the morning, and he was in the kind of a bunkhouse section, or I'd sleep in the bed next to grandmother. And then I realized that Aunt May had died in that bed at age 10. And so I would not know whether to touch the window on the outside with my head or touch the inside of the wall with my head, fear that I'd be connected either to a soul or a UFO situation. So we then moved out of the San Luis Valley when I was 6 years old, and my dad took a job in Meeker, Colorado, and I came down one other time, and I remember the excitement and the energy around going back out with the Grindle boys and seeing if we could dare the UFOs to find us. And then at age 11, my dad gets a call, you need to come. And And you got to understand that he was the guy that came if things happened that weren't right. Is that a true statement, Donnie? He was the person they all looked to solve problems. He was the executor of the state when it was done, and all of these issues that were based around that. And so I remember as a young boy following him into the field, and I didn't know what we were coming to, but I remember my dad. I said, "Dad, what happened here? What?" He said, "Oh," and my dad always had a way to explain things. Is I think it was probably a bunch of college kids playing a prank, and they somehow got a hold of a helicopter and lifted it up and dipped it in a vat of acid and burned off its shoulders. And then I said to Harry, what possibly happened here? And he said, "You probably know what happened here. It was probably UFOs." And then Aunt Nellie was a whole nother story, the owner of the horse with Uncle Burl, and she was always on the edge of out there, meaning mental health, seeing things, thought of in the valley as a person that could take you up to the mountain place and see things. And keep in mind, this is a family now that settled this valley in 1882 on the side of that mountain that's got its own graveyard, probably 2 miles as the crow flies from Uncle Harry's vortex. So it was really hard for me not to look at that as saying, I don't know, I haven't seen a UFO, but my mind is just, I'm poised. I'm like John Belushi at Animal House. I'm jumping around seeing if something might happen. So as an 11-year-old boy, when I saw that from my dad, it embedded in me. And I'm not sure I saw the horse that day. I'm not sure I didn't see the horse that day. There was so much media and stuff, but I know I was with my dad and I was in the field, and there were a lot of people asking questions of Bob King of what was going on there.
Thank you, Dave. Appreciate that. And now I'm going to turn the attention to Katie Page here. And Katie, you've heard a little bit of what Dave thought some of the theories were. What happened to the horse? I mean, nobody really knows for sure what happened. And, what theories have you heard for the cause of Snippy's mutilation?
Well, it's really interesting. I'm just going to spend just 2 minutes really quick just to say why I kind of got involved in this in the first place. Long story short, in a nutshell, 1970, we moved to Colorado from 75 to 78. So I'm 9, 10, 11, 12 years old. This is where Linda Moulton Howe, investigative journalist, got her start in Elbert County, Colorado. My mom's boyfriend had a ranch out there. Mutilation time was high. Where it's connected into Snippy and your family was Dr. Leo Sprinkle and APRO. They were really quick out here at the Snippy event, and Dr. Leo Sprinkle, unbeknownst to me and my family, we were warned and threatened never to talk about what happened out in Elbert County, specifically Kiowa, Colorado, also Elizabeth, Franktown, Simla, Rama, that whole area. And not just cows, but horse, sheep. We even found articles about dog. People were arming themselves, fearing they'd go to humans next, right? A lot of speculation back in the mid-70s to late 70s that maybe they were satanic cults involved. Was it the military? Were these Black Axis projects going on? And for the past 12 plus years now, I've been diving deep into specifically the Rocky Mountain Ranch area, Elbert County, and Snippy, 1967. Dr. Leo Sprinkle kind of all started here. So thank you for having me here. It's like my honor to be here, honestly, and you guys are all fantastic. What do I think causes these animal mutilations in Snippy? And, and getting to meet Linda Howe and the research that I've done, there's so many aspects. There's the mysterious blacked out helicopters, right, that we see. But the fact that you mentioned that other animals, I had a great witness out of Rama. Her family pioneered Elbert County, drove to Wyoming to interview her and her family. They had a dead calf on the ground. The husband was on horseback, checking the cows for calf. There was 4 incisions, top of the fur removed, nothing there. He gets back on the horse, drives to the ranch, gets my witness. They come back in the pickup truck, and much like Snippy, no bugs, no track marks. They were miles off the county road. The calf was cauterized, organs removed, blood drained, all of that. What's causing it? For a while, I was saying maybe it's our military, maybe it's they're testing groundwater, but it doesn't make sense, especially in the Snippy case. It's a mystery. Is it extraterrestrials? Possibly. There's just that cone of silence that happens. I think we had a recent, do you want me to talk about that, or are you going to save that? Joseph Spencer. So Joseph Spencer, who was supposed to be here on the panel, somehow got my contact information. He was one of the first 4 people, I think he said, or 3? Fourth person. So there were 3 others. He was the 4th person to see Snippy. And Keri met with us in Colorado Springs, and we sat down with him in a retirement and had a nice lengthy interview with him. And I think most of the things he talked about you had heard before, but there was a piece of new information that I found interesting. He had some names. I'm like, how did you get to be one of the first 4 people at Snippy? He was in school in Alamosa, going to school, and his buddy was friends with the doctor that came out, and they're like, hey, you want to go see, Snippy lady? And so he went out, but he talked about, the impressions in the ground. He actually talked about a UFO encounter that I'd never heard before with your Aunt Nellie. Have you heard that before?
No, I had not.
Yeah, so that was interesting. He was saying that I think it was a couple of days before the event, that she had witnessed some strange lights in the valley, and it frightened her and was hiding under the bed. So that was kind of new information. And when they went out, they saw the impressions. But he said that there was somebody there, I think it was the pathologist or the veterinary pathologist, with like this big lead spoon picking up this green radioactive material. And he said it reminded him of a stick of butter, but it was like a lime green jello. And I had never heard that, and that was new. And he's like, all these years I've been reading reports about Lady or Snippy, and I want to get the facts right before I leave this earth. And so that's why he wanted to meet with us, and he did, and I'm very appreciative of that. And he was supposed to be there, but his health is declining rapidly. So, but I am in communication with him, and I'm happy we got to interview him. Something else that came forward during that interview I found interesting was 2 nights after the Snippy event, in the Brown Mountain region, and is it this way, Brown Mountain?
No,
it's this direction.
Yeah.
Brown Mountain, 2 days after Snippy, there was a supposed UFO crash, warded off by the Army. Air Force was involved, and what's fascinating about this is I have a friend he was best friends with Jack Swigert from Apollo 13. He's heavily involved, helped him run for Congress. I said, were you aware of some event in Brown Mountain right after the Snippy event? He goes, absolutely, I was. And there was an event. So that is a lead I'm following, because I think it might directly tie to this sighting, and to find out how many anomalous lights and sightings and mutilations in the San Luis Valley and Elbert County. What do these locations have in common? I don't believe it's all the military. Maybe some of them are. I don't believe it's satanic cults. I think it's something very mysterious that we don't have answers for.
Thank you, Katie. I want to pass it to Dave next, and just to talk about, kind of echo off of what we're hearing from Katie. You've got this idea that there's UFOs, ball lightning, secret government experiments, it's local kids, it's predatory animals. There's all these things floating around in the family's narrative. There's no answers, though. And as Dave, as a young boy, is impacted by these stories, the family is impacted just the same in various other ways, wondering what really did happen to this animal. And Dave, when you're thinking back now, after discussing a little bit more with Katie and myself, what are you thinking now? What is the most likely cause? What do you think really happened to this horse?
Well, I probably answer the same way my dad did, and we asked him here last year. Is I don't know. There's a lot of things in the universe we don't know, but there's a lot of miracles out there. So don't be afraid. It's a black box moment that you've opened up Pandora's, and I was always afraid of those moments because the sequences with Nellie didn't end. You know, Nellie was the horse owner, and Donnie's here, and I would love to have him come up and talk, but both of us had to deal with our Aunt Nellie and who she was on the ranch and who she was in regards to this is a UFO thing. And do you believe, Donnie, that she believed it was the UFO thing? Yeah, and so that was always painted, and she believed, like Uncle Harry did, there was a vortex right above the graveyard, right below Big Bear, that there was a vortex like Skinwalker Ranch. And so her and Harry wouldn't let off, and then one day Dad got Harry talking at, I don't know what the age was, 12 or 13, and he said, yeah, he'd been stopped on the highway from Blanca to the sand dunes and just frozen in time for 6 or 8 hours. Donnie, did you hear that story from Harry? So he had me on this vortex deal above the graveyard and stuff. And so I think as I was growing up, and there's grandmother continually telling me about death, and there's Harry, and she just had more death. There was always death. You know, she just kept saying, you know, Lord, please call my number. Just call my number. She'd bury another one and call my number. And I'm a little kid, and I'm now a teenager, and I'm worried about it. And I've never been to a funeral in my life. In fact, my dad was worried and didn't let me go to my granddad's funeral, Coley King, and he was the patriarch of the bunch. And so when my grandmother did die, I was a freshman in college, an older freshman, but I'd come back to be the pallbearer. And I remember the scene at the ranch was still all around Nellie. Nellie had cornered the confusion, you know, of the death, UFOs, and everything. And grandmother's funeral was beautiful. And then I drive home and get back to Grand Junction, Colorado, and Dad says, you need to come back down here. And I said, I'm not coming back to Death Valley. I'm just not coming back, Dad. It's really hard on me. I don't like it. And he said, well, you need to come back for me. And I said, I'm not coming. He said, well, let me tell you what happened. Your Aunt Nellie, for whatever reason, got upset and drove over the top of the grave. And she is now going to die. And in her car, and was it asphyxiation or... She'd piped but over the top of grandmother's grave in the graveyard and near the vortex. And so my mind's on all these things. And so, you know, I was so tainted by that whole situation of, I'd never seen a UFO in that scenario, and I hadn't been that. So now you got this horse, you got Nellie, you got my grandmother, you got this ranch, you got the vortex, all this stuff going on. For me to come back full circle to this point is almost unbelievable. To actually have said to my son when he took over as CEO of the company, and he says, I want to run festivals. And I said, well, you got to be authentic to run one. I mean, it's got to be, you know, if you're going to run a peach festival, my words were, you need to be 4 generations of peach people. Otherwise, don't dabble in festivals. People are too serious. And he said, well, where are you going with that? And I said, well, Snippy is one that could be, because the unexplained events in this valley, and I think most of you know, I just buried my mother and father in that graveyard this last June, and there's been so much pain in that graveyard where Aunt Nellie believed it was next to the vortex that, you know, I made sure we scattered ashes in such a fashion that we protected the graveyard and put Bob King in charge of it. He was the guy going to be in charge of stuff, you know, and so he was that parting moment. So it's deep in me of how we even got to this spot called Snippy.
Thank you. Katie, here and after Dave, is there something that you want to set your sights on when it comes to what actually happened to this horse? Do you have something like, forget all the rules of what you might have heard, the research that was due to prove whatever? What do you think happened to Snippy?
First of all, I want to say I was honored last year to meet Grandpa Bob. I don't know if you all remember who were here last year, but he took the mic, and you guys are but I'm so glad you didn't take the mic from him. It was a special moment, and I was honored to meet him. So what a wonderful guy. You know, and the impact, I think the impact on children and families, it's a real thing. And talking with Eric and to Trey and others, you know, about why no disclosure and why we can't get the truth of what's going on here. It's deep because it affects a lot of people in very real ways, and there's a lot of liability, emotional issues, and it's generational. I'm one of those research people that I want proof. But that being said, there's so many unusual things about especially Lady and some of these other ranchers that have lost livestock. And also the elk. We didn't even get to the wild game, the elk and the deer and everything else. Something unusual is going on. So perhaps it is somebody coming down like the Carl Higdon. We were just out in Rawlins investigating the 1974 Carl Higdon, and it was elk related. They were taking elk. So was it a matter, are they something else coming and learning from what's happening here? I don't know, but it's certainly a possibility. And I've come to the conclusion after all the research I've done that it could be a multiple, it's not an either or answer. Different things have been going on with different types of livestock. Maybe our government is looking at cattle on certain circumstances, but maybe not perhaps with Snippy. So I'm just kind of left scratching my head like all of you, really.
Katie, that's a convenient answer. You have both answered. It was from the UFOs, maybe it was from land. You cover everything with that. I totally get it. And so, why are we here this weekend? And, at the end of the day, the purpose of this event is to explore and discuss the mysteries, the unexplained, and to foster a sense of community. At the end of the day, to highlight the significance of understanding and preserving local history and folklore, encouraging you all as participants to take this weekend with an open mind and curiosity. And at the end of the day, there's a lot of interesting topics that we have to discover here. And at the end of the day, there's also a lot of other items that are available to those that want to go to sand dunes or to the hot springs and enjoy the local area. And so, just to close things down, at the end of the day, we don't really have an answer for you as what to happen to Snippy. We want to know, and we're going to discover this someday. And at this point, we're left with our own ideas of what may have happened. And it's very curious. Those that have curiosity will maybe discover this truth. I want to thank the panel members, Dave and Katie, for their time. And I want to, continue this conversation outside of the microphones. And I've already heard this throughout the weekend, individuals discussing various ideas they may have. This is the beginning of something very special here at Snippy, and I'm very happy to have all of you here. Thank you very much.